I never asked to be neighbors with a fancy lakeside resort. My family's land has been in our name for over 100 years. 300 acres of rolling pasture, oak trees, and the old red barn my granddad built with his own hands. About 15 years ago, a big developer bought the land bordering mine and dug out what they call Silver Pines Lake, an artificial lake fed by a spring creek that meanders through my property before flowing into the dam they built. They sold it as a private waterfront paradise, with a high-end lodge, cabins, and, naturally, a shiny HOA to run the show. At first, I didn't care. They paid me a tiny easement fee every year for the creek's water rights. They promised they'd maintain the dam and keep the lake from flooding back onto my land. I stayed out of their business and they stayed out of mine until last spring. It started with a letter. The HOA claimed my old barn, which sat about 40 yards from their fancy walking trail, was an eyesore and a hazard to their guests. They demanded I restore or remove it immediately. I ignored it. That barn housed my tractor, my hay, and a lot of memories. 2 weeks later, I came back from a supply run to find a bulldozer in my pasture and half the barn reduced to splinters. A crew in safety vests and HOA caps told me they had authorization to demolish the unsafe structure. I lost it. I called the county sheriff, who showed up and scratched his head. He told me the HOA had filed some bogus code violation claim with the county inspector, but no one ever sent me a notice, and they sure didn't have any right to bulldoze my property without a court order. I tried to get the HOA to pay for the damage. They laughed me off and told me to take it up with our lawyers. Their lawyer sent me a letter threatening to countersue for loss of property value if I made a fuss. I guess they figured a rancher like me didn't have the cash or time to fight them. But they forgot one thing: who owns the water. See, that spring-fed creek is the only thing keeping Silver Pines Lake full. The water rights still belong to my family. Their entire resort exists because of a 50-year-old handshake agreement between my granddad and the original developer. It's all spelled out in the easement paperwork, which they clearly never read. So I did what any rancher with a bulldozed barn and a good memory would do. I walked down to the old stone dam where the creek feeds the lake. Tucked inside a rusted shed is a big steel valve that controls the flow. I hadn't touched it in years. I turned that sucker off tight. Within days, the resort's crystal-clear private lake dropped 2 feet. Their fancy boat dock was resting on mud. The lodge's pretty lakeside fire pit, now overlooking a smelly stretch of cracked shoreline. Panicked HOA board members called me nonstop. They offered to settle this misunderstanding. They'd rebuild my barn if I turned the water back on. I told them I'd think about it. But first, I sent them my own letter. They'd pay for the barn in full with local contractors I trust. They'd cover my lost hay and tractor repairs. And from now on, they'd pay 10 times the old easement fee if they wanted my creek to keep their precious lake alive. They threatened to sue, but my lawyer pointed out the water rights are ironclad. They knew they'd lose in court, so they caved. Last month, they finished my brand new barn. My tractor's got a new roof over its head, and my hay's dry again. And the HOA? They're paying my new fee every quarter, right on time. Funny thing is, they even installed a big, shiny privacy fence so their guests won't have to look at my ugly barn. I added a fresh coat of red paint just to make sure it stands out. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the porch watching the sunset, I wonder if they've learned their lesson. If you want the water, don't mess with the man who owns the creek.